Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. Today we are going to be going through my physical TBR cart, and I couldn't think of a more fitting t-shirt to wear. This cart has kind of been the bane of my existence, I'm not gonna lie. I have many books on here, I think like 50 maybe. And today we're going to go through every single one of these books, why I haven't read it yet, and approximately like when I bought it, because some of these books I bought a long time ago. The first book on this list is The Kiss Quotient, and this book was actually gifted to me by my friend Grace. She thrifted it for me, and yeah, I'm pretty excited to read it. The reason why I have not read this book yet is because I have just kind of been in a reading slump. I got it for Christmas, so it's like pretty recent. But I've heard great things about this book, so hopefully I will get around to it soon. The next book on the list is Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. Now, I liked Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight. I really enjoyed those books. I've already read them. This is the third book that was published, and I had all the intentions to read this book immediately after, but I ended up getting really busy with work, and then I ended up also having to do stuff for the podcast, and we had like a couple of books that we needed to read that were like seasonal, and I was not feeling the holiday season this year, and it put me in a reading slump. So like I still am in that same reading slump the reading slump I just mentioned in the last book. That's the same reading slump that I'm currently in. The next two books on my cart are The Rise of Kyoshi and The Shadow of Kyoshi. Now, these are the book version of Kyoshi from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I love Kyoshi's story. I feel like a lot of the story has been spoiled for me from like TikToks. I bought these books during COVID in 2020, and now they have been sitting on my shelf for 4 years. The next book on the list is For Her Consideration. This is a sapphic romance rom-com book. I have not read it yet because I know I already said I've been in a reading slump, but I've been especially in a romance reading slump, and I bought this book in May of last year, and I have not even gotten around to it. Next up is New Moon. And now listen, this is not my first time reading the Twilight series, okay? But I read Twilight, I think like 2 years ago at this point, and I have not gotten to New Moon yet. Like, I just have not had the time to read this book. I liked the Twilight books when I was growing up. I have a little bit of like a disdain for them because I was forced to read them by my stepmom, but I did read them, and I enjoyed them enough, and I loved the movies, obviously, because what 10-year-old girl didn't. But I just have not gotten to New Moon. Bella in the books is so insufferable, and that's all I really have to say about that. So this has been on my TBR cart for a while. Then we have A Runaway Groomsman. Now, this is actually kind of interesting. I'm reading this right now. It's been on my TBR cart for over a year. Courtney and I are doing it for the podcast next week, or in 2 weeks from now. And yeah, we're recording the episode tomorrow. I'm almost done with this book. I'm actually listening to the audiobook of it on Kindle Unlimited, because you can get it on there as well, but I'm counting it on my TBR cart because it's literally been on my TBR cart for over a year. Courtney loved this book. You know what? So far, it's pretty good. It's girthy. Next up, we have The Secret Service of Tea and Treason. I bought this book last year. I bought it exclusively because the cover is really cute. This is by the same author that did The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, which I have not read, but I heard really great things about. But I am looking forward to reading this. I think we're going to read this in January. It is January. In February for the podcast, so it will be read at some point this year for sure. Most likely. Sometimes we change what we're going to read on the podcast, but this is definitely one that we'll probably be reading. Okay, so then we have The Deal by Elle Kennedy. I read one Elle Kennedy book last year, and I did not like it very much, but Courtney said I was going to like these because they're hockey romances, and that the stories are fun, and there's like 10 of them, so they're just like kind of like silly reads. I got about 60 pages into this book, and I was just kind of like not into it. I think I bought this book last year, and I decided like, okay, I'm just gonna put it away for now and maybe come back to it. Not for any particular reason other than like I just wasn't feeling the storyline. Next up, I have Dawn of the Onyx, and I actually have 2 copies of this book because the author was kind enough to send me a copy. And I feel really bad because I have not gotten around to reading it yet, but I want to read this book so bad, and like I've picked it up a couple times, but I just have not been in the mood to read. So it's hard to make yourself read something, especially something that like somebody sent you. Like the author herself sent this to me, so like it is very near and dear to me. She also signed it for me. See? Isn't that cute? She signed it for me. She saw one of my TikToks, and so she sent me the books for me and Courtney to read. So we might read these on the podcast this year. We might not. It just depends, to be honest. These are relatively short books, and I know that there's I think there's 3 of them. I think the 3rd one comes out this year. So I hope to get around to this soon because I would love to like put something out there just to like say thank you for sending me this book. So yeah. Dawn of the Onyx by Kate Golden. A little change of pace. We've got Kurt Vonnegut's Bluebeard. I like Kurt Vonnegut a lot, but I definitely have to be in a little bit of a headspace to read this book. I think I got this book 3 years ago, and it's still sitting on my shelf. A Discovery of Witches is a book about a grad student who I think figures out that she's a witch. I think that's the premise of the book. And I bought this book on recommendation of one of the girls at Barnes & Noble probably 2 years ago, and listen, look at the font. Look at that. This is 100% the reason why I have not read it yet, is because the font is just, it's really small, it's really condensed, and that intimidates me. I would love to read this and to get into the series, but so far I have just not been in the mood to read something that is written in this, not even written, printed in this style. Like I don't know why, it reminds me of school, but I've been out of school now for a year, so maybe I should just get over it and read. Next up is 2 Parts Sugar, 1 Part Murder by Valerie Burns, and my boyfriend actually picked out this book for me. It is about a baker, and her name's Maddie, and she also, solves murders, and she has a dog, and so Terry was like, oh, I think Maddie will like this book, so he got me this book. I have not read it yet, just because, I just haven't. I might read this book pretty soon. It's pretty short now that I, am holding it in my hands. It's pretty short, and it does look really cute. I'm not gonna lie. It does look like a quick little cozy mystery book, so maybe I'll give this one a shot soon. Okay, Liberation by Imogen Keeley. I bought this book at Costco 5 years ago. I bought this book a long time ago. And I have read 1 historical fiction book ever, and I did not like it. So now I'm worried that I won't like this book, but it has been sitting on my shelf forever. All the Murmuring Bones by A.G. Slater. So I bought this book last summer because I was in the mood for some mermaid action. This book is about, mermaids, sirens, sort of I think Greek mythology, or maybe even, Gallic mythology, something along those lines. So I think that I want to read this book because it seems interesting, but I've got to be in the mood for mermaids. Also, the cover, gorgeous. Look at that. It's so simple, but then you catch it in the light and you're like, oh my god, what is that? Her Majesty's Royal Coven. Now, okay, what do I want to say about this book? I read the first 50 pages. Usually I try to give a book 50 pages to encapsulate me. If I can't get enthralled in 50 pages, I'll set it down and either return to it or it lives in infamy on the TBR cart. Basically, I'm getting the vibe that it's kind of like Pretty Little Liars, but witches. And I like that vibe, but it did not engulf me when I was reading it. A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. Okay, I read half of this book before I set it down indefinitely. Here's the thing. I don't like the world building in this book, and I don't like really the characters that much, and I was really confused a lot of the times. I got it because I wanted something magic-y, and I was hoping for wizards, but it's a little bit more magician-y, and Every time I think about magicians, I think about two things. I think about how one of Terry and I's friends like loves magicians and how that's so funny and weird. But I also think about Ben Platt in Pitch Perfect when he's I've got the magic in me. Yeah, that. The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Everybody and their mom loves this book. I have not read it yet because it is similar to the same reason why I haven't read A Discovery of Witches. The font is so small and it's jam-packed in here. The vibe of this book I know is immaculate. Everybody talks about how great the vibe is, and that's all I really know about it. I don't know what this book is about. This book I bought specifically because Leonie, the YouTuber, what is her YouTube account called? The Book Leo on YouTube. She said that this was a great book and I trust her with my life. So I picked it up. Have I read it yet? No, I have not. I read the first 20 or so pages and I had to read something else for the podcast, so. But I've heard from her that this is a good book, and I would like to be the judge of that. Do you want to do this next book with me? Okay, so the next book on the cart is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. I am on page 68, and I gave up. I know that this is like a really popular book series that people read when they're younger. I'd never heard of it, to be honest with you all. The American Roommate Experiment by Elena Armas. Now, I read The Spanish Love Dissection, was not a huge fan of it, but I still picked up this book anyway. I heard that this book is slightly better than The Spanish Love Dissection, but I also heard that from people who like The Spanish Love Dissection, so it's hard to judge. I don't really know what compelled me to buy this book, even though I didn't like The Spanish Love Dissection. I think it's just that I heard that it was better and I want to give her another chance to redeem herself. Shadow of the Gods is another book that has been on my TBR list for probably about a year now. I bought this book because it's got to be over a year because I bought this book immediately after House of the Dragon ended, and I was like, oh, I need some more dragons in my life. We are planning on reading this for the podcast in March, so we will see if we get to it. Like I said already, like sometimes we change up books, and this might be a book that we scrap, but we both already own this book, so it's definitely something that we're interested in reading. I know it's a series. I know the second book is out. I think there's going to be a third one, but the third one has not come out yet. So I think it's supposed to come out this year, but I do not remember. Another cozy book for me to read is One Feta in the Grave. This is the third book in a series, and you know what? I actually really liked this series. I read it in 2019. I would like to read this one because it is super short. It's such a cozy book. It's literally 300 pages. Like, it's so short. So I think it would be worth my time to read it, especially because I'm kind of like, I'm falling behind in my Goodreads goal, and I don't want to put too much emphasis on my Goodreads goal, but I also would like to complete it, so maybe I'll throw this in there. It should be pretty short. Catch-22, I bought this book 2 years ago, and I have yet to read it. I think I read maybe the first 10-20 pages of this book, and I was like, okay, I'm not in the mood to read this. My friend recently read it, and he told me that he was so bored, and look at how long that is. I can't be bored for that long. American Psycho. I wanted to read this book so bad. I don't think I ever will read this book. I read 60 pages or so into it, and it is very much like a commentary on society. That's like the purpose of the book, right? It's a commentary. I don't like it. The Fall by Albert Camus. Or Camus? I don't know how to say his name. Sorry. But I just could not get into it. And when I show you guys what the inside of these pages look like, you're gonna laugh. I refuse to read that. I don't know why. It's so short, too. This is actually kind of ridiculous. I should probably just read this book, like, in once right now, because it's only 147 pages, and most of the page is the indents on the side. Okay, now we've got two Russian literature chunks. We've got Anna Karenina and War and Peace. I will not be reading these books this year for a multitude of reasons. One, I simply do not want to. And two, look at how thick these books are. I read something that was like, you could read one chapter of War and Peace every day, and it would take you almost an entire year. Agatha Christie, The Last Seance. This is a compilation of her short stories. I read 4 or 5 of the short stories that are in here, if there's even that many. I read some Agatha Christie books when I was younger, and I really enjoyed them. And it's not that I don't enjoy her writing, because I do, and I think that she was a pretty interesting person. I just don't want to read short stories. Dracula, obviously, classic. Wonderful book. We were going to read it for the podcast last year for Halloween. Did we? No. Will we probably read it for the podcast? Probably not. Because, first of all, once again, look at those pages. I don't want to read pages like that. It's so daunting. But also, it's written in Old English style. And that's hard to read, you know? And I knew that when I bought the book. Okay, I did not fool myself into thinking that it wasn't that. I knew what it was when I signed up. Last year, I bought this book, From Bad to Cursed by Lana Harper, and I realized it was the second book in a series, so then I went back and I bought the first book, Payback's a Witch, and I have yet to read either of them. I bought them last January, so it's been about a year now. They enticed me with their cute covers, but then I just have not brought myself to read them. Final Girls by Riley Sager. So, this book was also recommended to me by a girl at Barnes & Noble, and I had bought it because I had just finished reading. It was right after I read Final Girls by Grady Hendrix. I went back to the bookstore to find something that had a similar vibe, and this is the book that was recommended to me. A couple people I know have read this book, and it's a hit or miss. My friend Kate said that it's definitely one that could just be skipped, but I already own it, so I probably should read it at some point. I'm not super, there's a common misconception about me that I like horror. I don't like horror. I like spooky. Okay, there's a difference. And I'm scared to read this book. There's another book on this list that I also feel the same way. Let me get that one. The Regulators by Richard Bachman. Terry got me one of those, blind date with a book things, and this was the book that was in it, and I'm too scared to read it. I'm not even kidding. I am terrified. I don't want to read it because I'm scared. I also looked up if, animals die in this one, and, the answer is yes, and I don't do very good with that. I actually returned the book, My Best Friend's Exorcism, because the dog dies in it, and I was like, I'm not reading that. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley is on the same note as Dracula, where I knew what I was getting myself into when I bought it. And I'm obviously familiar with the story, who's not? But it's just actually getting down to reading it. It's not even, I guess it has, the horrible pages that I don't like. I don't know if I want to read it, to be honest with you. I kind of feel the same way about Dracula. I don't know if I want to read it. I wanted to read it at one point, but now I'm not so sure if I want to spend my time reading that book. Okay, and the final book on this list, the book that has been on my shelf the longest for a whopping 9 years, literally so long, is The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. And that is because I needed to be in the right headspace to not want to eat meat for months. I have kind of meat aversion, I guess. Sometimes I can eat meat. I eat meat all the time. And most of the time I'm fine, but sometimes if I'm reminded of what I'm eating, I get the ick, and it's awful. So that is why I have not read The Jungle yet. I read part of it in high school for my not my English class, my American history class, actually, because it's about meatpacking, and I read part of it also 9 years ago when I bought it, and I just never finished the book. Regardless, I don't know for how much longer that book will be on my shelf. I've had it for 9 years. But that does it. Those are all the books that are on my TBR cart. Obviously, there's a common theme with all these, right? First of all, have not read them. Second of all, there's a multitude of reasons why I haven't read them. But a lot of them I bought in the last 2 years. And normally, I'm pretty good about reading the books that I have before I go out and buy new books. Last year was an exception. I think that having a podcast really got to my head and being like, oh, I can go buy this book for the pod and then not ever read it. My biggest New Year's resolution for the year is to not buy books that I don't like, because I own a lot of books that I don't like. And I own a lot of books that I have not read. So I can read books that I have not read that I want to read on Kindle or Libby or however I want to consume that. But I can't own the physical copy of it unless I like it. Some of these books we're going to read for the podcast, so I know at least 4 or 5 of the books on here are going to be gone by the end of the year. But if I could get this down to like half by the end of the year, I think that it's doable for me to be able to read half of these. Some of these books I'm not going to read this year for sure. Like, I'm definitely not reading any of these Russian literature books. Like, I'm just not doing it. Or probably The Jungle, if we're being honest. I'm not going to read that book this year either. We'll come back to this maybe at the end of the year, and we'll talk about how far I got into my TBR cart and what I thought of some of the books that I read. That's it. That's all I have for you all. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. Tell me what book has been on your TBR cart for too long. If you want to follow the podcast, you can. The description has all the links to that sort of stuff. And yeah, that's all I really have to say other than, oh yeah, happy reading.